In this lab, we're going to be creating an EC2 instance that is going to have the Windows Server operating system, and we're going to learn how we can remote into that EC2 instance. When it comes to Windows systems, whenever you need to remote into a Windows system, you don't use SSH, you don't use secure shell to establish a remote connection to that server. Instead of that, what you're going to be using is the remote desktop protocol, or RDP for short. The basic steps to be able to launch a Windows Server EC2 instance are similar to the steps that you follow to launch a Linux-based EC2 instance. Some of the differences that we're going to have here is, first of all, remember, we're not going to be able to use SSH to remote into the remote server. Instead of SSH, we're going to use Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP. And the other thing that we need to take into consideration is whenever we remote into a Linux-based system, we're going to be using the private key that we either create brand new or one that we're reusing that we already have access to. When it comes to Windows, we're not going to be using, again, we're not going to be using SSH. Instead of that, we're going to use RDP. Whenever you need to log in using RDP, you need three pieces of information. You either need the IP address, in this case, because we're connecting from the internet, either you need the public IP address of the server, the DNS name of it, and then besides that, we're going to need the username and the password to be able to log in into the Windows Server. The username, the default username is going to be administrator, and the password is not a password that we're going to assign to the EC2 instance whenever we launch it. Instead of that, the password will be encrypted inside of the private key that we normally use whenever we launch an EC2 instance. I'm going to show you all of those steps in a moment. So let's begin by going to the EC2 service. Let's go to the dashboard, to the EC2 dashboard. And then what I'm going to be doing right now is I'm going to be launching an instance. So I select this option. The next step is to give it a name. As I mentioned before, this is going to be a Windows Server, so I can call it Windows Server. The next step is to select the AMI that we're going to be using. Remember, we're going to be using a Windows Server, so we need to select Windows from this option here. Then, because most likely you're using the free tier, to save money, we're going to be selecting the free tier. In this case, let me use the Windows 2019 base. Okay, so let's use this one. Next step is to select the instance type. Again, in order to save money or not to spend any money and use the free tier, we're going to use a T2 Micro, which contains one virtual CPU and 1 GB of RAM. Okay, so far so good. The next step is to either, when it comes to the key pair, we either select an existing one or we generate a new one. So because I don't have, I might have created a key pair in the past in a different computer, and because I don't have access to that key pair, my best option is going to be to create a new key pair. But if you have access to a key pair, the private key, you can reuse that one. But in this case, like I said, I don't have access to an old key pair that I created, so I'm going to create a new one. And so I'm going to call it, let me call it Windows Server key pair, like so. And we have the option of selecting .pm or ppk. We're going to be using the PEM key. But remember, the main idea here is when we create that, when we create this key pair, we're going to be downloaded the private key. That private key will contain the password in an encrypted manner. Okay, so we will have to find a way to decrypt the password that is contained in the private key. So I'm downloading the key pair. I have it right now saved on my system. The next step is going to be regarding the network settings, because in this case I'm more interested in launching an EC2 instance, not so much on the networking aspects of the EC2 instance that I will be launching. I'm going to be using the default VPC that comes with, in this particular case, I'm in the Northern Virginia region, so I'm going to use the default VPC that is being provided to me. As you can see here, if I click on their settings, we can see here that I'm using the default in the VPC. We're using the default. I don't have any preference for subnets. All of the subnets that are part of this VPC are going to be public subnets, which means that they will have any EC2 instance that I place inside of those public subnets will have a public IP address. Okay, and that's what we can read here. We're going to obtain a public IP address that will be assigned to the to this EC2 instance once it gets launched. Now the next step is going to go into the security groups. I don't have an existing security group here for Windows servers, but I'm going to create a new one, and it's going to be called Windows Server Security Group SG, and I can use the same name here. Let me copy it from here, copy, paste. Okay, so far so good. The next step that I need to do is remember that the inbound rules of a security group are the ones that are going to be used to filter traffic into the virtual server, to the virtual machine that you're launching. In this case, because we selected a Windows-based AMI, the security group is already populating RDP in order to remote into this server, which is nice as if you think about it, because I don't need to select. I did not have to delete an SSH rule and add the new RDP that is going to be used for remoting into the Windows server. So it's going to be and then in order to remote into a Windows system, I'm going to use RDP. RDP stands for Remote Desktop Protocol. The protocol it uses for this is going to be TCP, and the port number for RDP is 3389. And then I also want to connect potentially from anywhere. That's why I'm going to say that the source of the traffic can be originated from anywhere. The way in which we specify that is by using this CIDR notation, which is 0.0.0.0/0. And I can use here, I can type in here RDP for remote access. Okay. Now that we have done this, all we have to do now is select the EBS volume that will be attached to this virtual machine. It's offering me to use a 30 gigabyte hard drive, which is fine. Windows usually uses much more space than a Linux virtual machine. And so I accept this, and then I'm not going to use any advanced features here. So I'm just going to launch the EC2 instance. And then in this case, it's just going to be a matter of waiting some time before the EC2 instance is ready and we can access it. So let me go to the EC2 instance dashboard and take a look. And by the way, this is the ID that is associated to the virtual machine that I just launched. So if I click on instances, we can see the server here. It's a Windows server. That's the label that I gave it. This is the instance ID. It says that the instance state is pending. Right now we can see that it's showing us running. And now the part that we need to wait before this machine is available for us to connect to it is the status checks. There are two status checks that need to be completed before we can connect to this virtual machine. So we're going to have to wait for that. But let me just also show you something. Sometimes this status check doesn't display. For some reason, there's a lag between showing the actual status check and whenever you're looking at it. So sometimes you might need to refresh this. But in this case, like I said, the status checks are going to be, once they're completed, we will continue with this demonstration. As we can see, the two status checks have passed, which is great. That means that we are almost ready to be able to start the process of being able to connect to this Windows server. So first of all, the first thing that I need to do is I need to find out what the IP address of this server is. And I can find, when I select this server, you can see that all the details appear here at the bottom. Among other things, I can see what the public IP address of this server is, which is this one. This is the IP address that I will be using to connect to this machine by using the remote desktop protocol. So let me just, for the time being, let me show you what it looks like. So let me go to remote desktop protocol. Click on this one. I open it. I type in the IP address of the server, which is this one, 54.242.231.209. If I try to connect to it, we see that it's asking us for a username and password. The username is going to be administrator, but what is the password going to be? We don't know that. And as I mentioned before, the password is encrypted in the PM key that I downloaded earlier. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to access the file that I downloaded. So give me just a moment and let me find the, okay, this is the PM key. I'm going to open it. I'm going to open it with Notepad, always, that's okay. Here is the key. This is the key that I'm going to have to use to extract the password. So now let me show you where I need to do that. If I click on this instance connect while I have this server selected, we're going to see 3 different options. Sessions Manager is a completely different way of connecting to an EC2 instance. The one that I want to use is the RDP client. As you can see here, it's telling me the details about the system that I have selected. But there's a part here, as you can see here, it says get the password. And I will be able to get the password because the password is encrypted in the PEM key that I downloaded when I created that key. So in this case, I click on this one, get password. Now it's asking me to upload the private key or I can simply, as you saw a moment ago, I opened the file and I copied the contents of the PEM key, which is this one. So I just copy this and then I can just paste it here. Okay. I could have uploaded the key itself, but in this case I copied the contents of the key and I just pasted it here. I need to make sure that I copied everything with beginning with this line, begin RSA private key, and ending with this line that says end RSA private key. Now when I click the decrypt password, I'm going to obtain a password for this machine. And as you can see, this is the password. So if I want to copy, I just copy it here. It's being copied. Now I go back to my RDP application. So this was the RDP application that I used. And remember that I was stopped at this point because I didn't know what the password was. So what I can do now is I can just do that. This is the same password that you can see below. It's the one here. And now, because I want to remember these credentials, I'm just going to click OK. And I will be establishing a remote connection. As you can see, it says the identity, so the remote desktop connection is saying the identity of the remote computer cannot be verified. Do you want to continue? Anyway, in this case, I know that I launched that virtual machine on EC2, so I don't have a problem with that. So I would just say that I want to trust connections from this computer to that computer. So just do that, and in a moment we're going to see the desktop of the remote computer, and that is what we are just about to see. And let's wait a moment, and shortly we will be able to see. Right now it's because it's doing some setup. Will take a few more moments, but eventually we are going to see the desktop of the server that we're connected to. This is the server that I connected to. This is the one that's being hosted in AWS. Okay, and with this we conclude this demonstration. I have this prompt here. It says, do you want to allow your PC to be discoverable by other PCs and devices in this network? This machine resides in AWS inside of my VPC. I do want this machine to be discoverable by machines that are located there, because all of those machines would be used for some particular application that I would like to use there. So I would select yes. And as you can see, this is I'm connected to the remote server, and you can see all the details about it. Okay, so pretty much this is the conclusion of this. You can see how easy it was. It wasn't that complex. The important thing to keep in mind was, well, a couple of things. First of all, because this is a Windows server, I was not going to SSH into it. Instead of that, we were going to use the Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP. The security group needed to have an inbound rule for RDP. In this case, I want to allow traffic to come from any computer out there on the internet, potentially. Of course, only the one that happens to know the username and the password would be the one that would be able to log into this machine. And as you saw, well, I started the application, the remote desktop protocol application, in this case remote desktop connection, that's part of Windows. And then I knew what the username was, which was administrator. I did not know what the password was. The password was contained inside of the private key that I downloaded when I was creating the key pair for this machine. And once I was able to open that key, I copied the contents of it, and then if you remember, let me repeat the steps, but pretty much what I did was when I was looking at the different instances, let me just close this for a moment. Let me close the remote desktop protocol. Pretty much what I did was I selected this, I click connect, then I said to you that there were three options. Sessions Manager is a completely different way of connecting remotely to an EC2 instance. In this case, I needed to use the RDP client. I did not need to download the remote desktop protocol file in this case, but pretty much what I did was I started the remote desktop protocol application in Windows. This is the public IP address of that server. I click connect. In this case, it's going to connect me because I told it to remember my username and password. Remember, the username was administrator, and the way that I obtained the password was I clicked on this option here, get password, and then I pasted the contents of my that's actually the password itself. I pasted the contents of my key pair, which I did here, and then I decrypted the password, and finally after I did that, I obtained this password. This was the one that I obtained. I copied this one and I pasted it here. In this case, I'm already logged in, but this is because I specified that I wanted to remember the username and password, which was administrator and this password. And that's how you configure. That's how you launch. First of all, Windows Server, and that's in the steps that I showed you a moment ago, were the steps that you need to follow in order for you to be able to connect to this machine remotely. Okay. Now let's make sure to get rid of to terminate this EC2 instance so you don't incur into any charges. So I select this one. Now what I need to do is I need to go to terminate instance, click terminate, and now that EC2 instance is gone, so you don't need to worry about incurring into any expenses, especially if you leave a virtual machine that you just wanted to create it just for testing purposes. Okay, so this is all. I hope that you have enjoyed this. Please, I would appreciate it if you like this this video, if you learned something from it, and also if you could subscribe, that would be great. I will try to create new videos as time goes by. Okay, thank you very much, and see you during the next whenever I create the next video. Thank you very much.